I settled on self-propelled watercraft because of the wellness factor, and early realizing that this thing was therapeutic for me. That happened years ago and just fueled kind of the fire, which I call kind of a primal fire, like to find out the ancient boats and learn how to build them.
A warm water welcome to all of you listening live right now and anyone who's listening to this recording in the future. You might be a TRAK pilot, a paddler, an experienced adventure guide, or a beginner and it's all new. Or you might not have anything and you're still in the place. I'm Nicholas Jones, that you've joined, and we know that we appreciate you and the time you're offering to this new conversation. We may not know each other, but we're all connected by virtue of one thing, and that's the water. The water that's connected us, that's around us, that's been around for millions of years, the water that we have in common. And it's the water that flows inside us and all around us. As you join us, please type into the chat window and tell us what the nearest body of water is to you, okay? Tell us what the nearest body of water is to you, and here's the second part. What are you most grateful for in your journey with, near, on, in, or even underwater? Okay? Nearest body of water to you, and what you're most grateful for in your journey with water. So you're listening to episode 7 of a new series on TRAK's Zoom Away Blue Fridays. This series is a new conversation. It's unfolding like a gift. You have likely felt the positive benefits of being in, on, and around water. But we're going to look deeper. We're going to look at the inherent reasons for that. So in this series, Wellness Equal Water, we're taking a journey with you to discover the connection between water and wellness within. We'll unpack the many dimensions of water and how it impacts human health and biology and the health of the planet. So join us and help us create a blueprint to navigate this journey, leading the way to uncover the source of human vitality and possibly redefine our understanding of a new biology and the life-charging qualities of water. So let me introduce myself. My name is Nicholas Jones, and I'm your host for Wellness Equal Water. I'm speaking to you right now from Ketch Harbor in Nova Scotia, Canada. So the nearest body of water to me, I can see it from here, is the Atlantic Ocean about 200 meters down the street. And what I'm most grateful for in my journey with water is how it takes my breath away, literally. Moving here just a couple of months ago, after driving 5,000 kilometers over land, clear across Canada, moved our family here recently. We arrived on the East Coast, and I was catching the first glimpse of open water. It was like just cresting around a hill south of Halifax, and I saw the endless horizon line of the Atlantic, and I was just moved to tears. I had nothing to say, so it took my breath away. I've been working with Nolan and the TRAK team for 13 years. I'm a corporate shaman, a truth seeker, and a sense maker, and my mission is to bring spirit back into work. I'm no expert, and I'm constantly asking why, and I try to keep a beginner's mind. To use water as the analogy, I know I'm one drop in the ocean, and that really empowers me. Knowing that the truth is the whole ocean, and that we're each as a drop, whole, complete, and indivisible, containing a piece of that truth. So I'd like to introduce now Nolan Uveyard, the founder and managing director of TRAK Kayaks. I want to introduce him to talk about the why of this conversation, right? Like the why and the how of this conversation, how it started in the first place. So I'm going to turn it over to Nolan to set the stage before we really jump in. Nolan, how are you?
Hey, Nicholas. Nice to be across the country from you and see you across the Zoom call. And for everyone else that's on the call today, we're definitely in for something special. You ask why we're doing this series in the first place, and really recently especially, I've felt pretty deeply that it's time to kind of draw. I use the analogy, time to draw the line in the sand, you know, and maybe that's on the beach somewhere, but just the way things are going and the confusion and all of the stuff going on in the world, it's time to draw the line in the sand, time to really kind of take back, you know, our humanity, time to take back our health and our vitality, you know, not let it be dictated by others, or we really got to take ownership, and also time to take back that connection to nature, you know, stop fighting it, you know, really embrace nature. We aren't only just part of it. You know, people say, you know, well, we're part of nature. We are nature. And so the origin of the kayak is really connected to that, which is an exciting part about today's talk, is really connecting it back to the origin of the kayak and some of the initial things that has drawn myself and many others with TRAK to what we've been doing over the last 15 or so years. And of course, water is also at the core of this, of taking back our ownership of nature and our being part of it. One of the things I've talked about is really clearing the noise, you know, clearing the noise and getting to the heart of the matter, you know, and what's real, what's really going on in the human body, what's going on with health. These are some of the questions that I think we need to be asking these days. And this is where to me, today's special guest really comes into this and comes into play in terms of my own journey and my own experience. Gion's been a big part of that. So we're in for a unique talk and a lot of really great stories. And you know, when we talk about walking our paths in life, we all have unique paths. You know, there isn't a formula for this thing. For life, sometimes it would be nice if there was more of a formula. There isn't a formula. We all walk a very unique path, and you know, you have to look at where we gain or where we take our sources of wisdom from. And for me, it's been kind of a primal gut level in terms of where I've found the best sources of my own wisdom as I've, you know, had different experiences in life. And with today's guest, there aren't too many people, in my view, that understand this concept of really sourcing your own wellness, you know, really being at the source of your own wellness. And so Gion's been a big part of that for me in terms of what I've observed over the course of time that we've known each other. Gion's one of my nearest, I'd say my nearest and dearest friends. And we go back a long time. He's a very for all of you who know him and who are going to get to know him here, he's a very special human being and has a very unique life story. To say that he's been a big part of my life, I think is a pretty gross understatement. And you know, from our walks in the bird sanctuary, Gion, to some of the special time we've had together in Peru, you know, the time back there, to having him, for some of you that on this call might know this, but having him actually camp out at TRAK headquarters to build and assess kayaks as they come from the production line and get them ready to go out to our customers around the world. And so I think I would say I wouldn't be here right now in the way that I am if Gion hadn't come into my life. So to say that he's been a big part of my life, like I said, is an understatement. And so, you know, I guess what I would say is there's no words. I'm looking forward to having him share some of this with us, and many on the call here. We've all known each other for quite some time, and we've all known Gion, and so we're very honored to have him here to join us on this call and share some of his journey along the way. This isn't the end of the trail, is it, Gion? It's not the end of the trail. This is a little bit of foreshadowing to what might come in the call. We've got a little inside joke between the two of us around the end of the trail. But it's time to introduce him proper. So I'm going to pass it back to Nicholas, and just really look forward to having him tell us about his journey of sourcing wellness and how water and the origin of the kayak is connected to that part of Gion's story. So I'll turn it back to you, Nicholas, and let's kick this off. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you, Nolan. We'll be definitely stitching you in and weaving you in a little bit later here, okay? So just to how the conversation will flow, conversation will be about 45 minutes long from here, followed by a 10 and 15-minute Q&A. So if you have some questions or some comments or something like that, as you know, the chat window's right there. So we'll come back to them at the end of the call. So we didn't want these conversations to be overly structured and controlled. So we're going to flow like a strong, mature river, literally this time. It's intentional but meandering. It still gets to the ocean. So we just ask that you flow with us, okay? Our chat window is managed by Curtis, so thank you, Curtis. Add any comments, like I said, or questions, and we'll come back to them. If you're on the call, if you don't mind muting to keep your sound quality as good as possible when we record this, and we'll unmute you when we open up the Q&A. So let's kick this off by acknowledging one thing. We're about 70% water. The Earth is about the same. No coincidence, about 70% water. And we're going to be talking mostly about water here in this series, Wellness Equals Water. To date, we've learned that water whispers to your mind and shifts your moods. It has an innate intelligence, and it can paint pictures when it freezes in order to communicate with us. We learned about resilience and persistence in a ballad about water and rock from an absolutely inspiring outdoor adventurer. We heard how through an intimate relationship with water, over time, we experience a truly transformative shift in our wellness. We were illuminated about the relationship between light and water from the wisdom of an environmental health expert and biophysicist engaged in quantum biology. And in our last episode, we were taken on an inner journey of intuition by a guide for our consciousness, discovering that water is the only element that reflects us back to ourselves, like a mirror for humanity. So in summary, know your water, know yourself. You were born in water. You cannot live without water. And if we move beyond just managing it or using it as a resource, there is a boundless gift available. So let's jump in. This episode is going to be a little different. Imagine an ancient river that's been flowing in a huge circle for 10,000 years. Then the river returned to carve a smaller circle for 100 years, and then returned again for an even smaller circle of 10 years, before heading into the future for another 10 years, even 100 years. The circles are cycles of time. We're going to weave these circles together in this conversation, tying knots and sharing stories as we journey through time to the source of wellness and to explore an origin story. So our guest today, our very special guest, is Gion Bezzola. Gion is water. He knows it, he respects it, and flows like it. And he knows the role water has played in the story of being human. Gion is a craftsman and a maker. In fact, a watercraft maker who has direct experience crafting various ancient and traditional boats with his own hands and guided by his heart, with a reverence for the original designers, and brought all of that into TRAK as one of the company's earliest builders and makers. Gion is an ambassador for wellness, for a holistic way and a natural lifestyle that promotes true health, renewal, and regeneration, having had direct experience in various pathways for healing on his own personal journey. Gion is a wisdom keeper, having received direct transmissions and teachings from indigenous wisdom holders and healers, and in turn has been entrusted with holding and then sharing, when appropriate, this sacred knowledge. At TRAK, he is referred to as an elder, a title of honor and respect for someone who knows what honor and respect really is, and for someone who holds the wisdom of lineages and who is available to guide, mentor, and support another's path in life. I'd also like to reintroduce Nolan. He doesn't really need an introduction here, but maybe a way to listen to him in this conversation as a context would be useful. Nolan is holding the vision of TRAK. He's sourcing the mission of the company at the core and charting the future with his team, with you and the entire TRAK community around the world. He sees an expanded role for TRAK, a corporate vehicle, crafted beyond business as usual, beyond corporate social responsibility or environmental stewardship, to really honoring the lineage of the design of the boat and the holistic wellness of the individual and the overall community. So on behalf of the global TRAK community, we're delighted and grateful to welcome Gion to join us right now, and with Nolan to follow a little bit later. So Gion, welcome, my friend. How are you?
Thank you. I'm filled with joy.
Awesome. I'm kind of
Really?
used to that with you.
Really, and I would like to start off by asking both you and Nolan, I'd really like to meet the guy you're talking about. I think I would be interested in that acquaintance.
Well, Gion, how about we just chat for a little bit, and I'll see if I can track him down later and introduce him to you, okay?
Wonderful, and I take you at your word, which I know is true. So, hey, I'm in a good space.
So listen, we asked. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to place it quickly in context. When I read the note from I believe Curtis put it together, but it came from TRAK about me. I just had to go, which I often do, into a private space when I'm just overcome with gratitude, and just sit and weep for a while. I just had to integrate it, which was a bit of a chore for me. Anyway, a prelude to our discussion, and it's a beautiful discussion. My goodness, it just digs me deep to my core. Is I open sacred space in the way of the Karo elders, the Quechua-speaking Karo, who we all met, we all studied with, the three of us in Peru, by opening sacred space to the six directions, and it was very, very personalist time, because without it I couldn't proceed. Then I took apart the medicine bundles that I inherited from my elder who died, and he left me as the keeper, which was another huge step into that realm of spirit, of creator. And I brought them all out and I laid them on the sacred cloth that I got in Peru, and I smudged. And so enveloping this whole discussion, enveloping my life really, and I have a feeling yours and Nolan's to start off with, and there'll be others, that it became that the smoke became infused with all of that honorable intention, all the respect, all the beauty of those ancient vessels, and the beauty around them, the culture that built them. And so I honored my mesa from Peru, like the Plains Indian medicine bundle. And so all the parts, the pipes, the drum, the rattles, open sacred space with one that I was gifted to have made under the direction of an elder. And so all of that sacred kit, you might say, is part of the background, the foundation, the really infusing this discussion wherever it goes with the best of spirit, I believe. That's what I live. And so that was the beginning. That was the beginning for me today. So there you go.
Gion, thank you. You have set the stage the way the ancients did, the way that we used to work, and we will talk more about that. But it will make this conversation very different, and I hope we appreciate, over time, as some of these teachings return, the value of what you just shared and how it works for us as human beings. So coming back to this moment, we asked everybody what the nearest body of water was to them. So what is the nearest body of water to you right now?
Well, I've thought about an answer, and it just comes back to me, my inner part, recognizing the absolute value, the sacredness, the purity, the beauty of any body of water. Wherever water is, it resonates for me. So right now I'm resonating with the water within, really. But the Shuswap Lake and the lake system, and there's such beautiful bodies of water around the North Okanagan in British Columbia that I could go on and on for the rest of the call, just naming water places that have gifted me with their energy. So it's kind of a macro answer rather than a micro one. But I'll leave it at that.
That's perfect. That's perfect. So I need to ask you as well the same question we asked everybody else. What are you most grateful for in your journey with, near, on, in, or underwater?
Wow. That's not only a good question, but it requires really a deep dive. My answer has to be speak about in, around, and that of First Nations history, ceremony, spirit. At 19, when I reached Uranium City, a boomtown, as a member, just a young guy in the RCMP with some experienced men, it was the clash of civilizations, the harsh, hard, explosive resource extraction. It's really cruel in a way, the way I think of Pachamama, and a huge First Nations population. And I just immediately wondered about that. I said, I have no skill, no understanding, no education to be there with a uniform on. But I noticed something. At 19 years old, from a rough, tough working class district, and I asked, I forget who I asked now, who are those people? And I identified one or two or three, and they said, oh, they're the elders. And that started the journey. I mean, that's 61, 62 years ago. But it implanted something that never left me and just grew and grew and grew and grew. And one of those questions was, as an ignorant young, I was a teenager, is how do you become one? And of course, I thought in the usual white way, well, you got to fill out an application form. You got to, you got to go before an interview board. I mean, you got to have certain skills and capacities and capabilities. You have to have all that in the context that I only knew that and nothing else. And so that was the seed that got implanted. And I'm just I consider myself one of the most grateful human beings on the planet. I keep a gratitude journal. I write in it first thing every morning, because the more I'm grateful, and because I'm grateful and I recognize that, the more opportunities come to embrace and be grateful. So please pick up a gratitude journal. But that was the beginning of years and years and years of invitations, because I didn't realize it myself. I was walking like they walked. I wasn't walking like, a superior thinking of the colonial era. I mean, I just never thought that way. But I think spirit was guiding back then, even although I was go through all kinds of trauma and addictions and everything else before I realized, go back to the teaching, go back to that. Anyway, I'll stop it there.
Thank you for sharing that, Gion, as part of your Genesis story, right? As how you came onto this path. What was your first impactful experience with the element of water itself? When did water really come into your life?
Okay, it started off at possibly 4 or 5 years old in a traumatic, dark, nasty experience with water that frightened me and put me on a track to avoid it for many, many years. In fact, there's still a little tinge there as I deal with some of the deeper spots that of PTSD, which I was challenged with for decades. It was an interesting story, really, from my perspective now. It was on the Petawawa River in Petawawa, Ontario, when my dad had volunteered for the Second World War as an immigrant Swiss mountaineer. Not an ignorant, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know how that word came in. Anyway, he certainly wasn't an ignorant man. And my mother, who really wanted me to be, I guess, friends with water, couldn't have done it in a more kind of unproductive way. She took a hold of me and walked into the river. And of course, I was immediately frightened. I was a sensitive kid. And she immediately put me down, and the water came up to my chin, but my feet were on slippery rocks. And I just lost it. Absolutely lost it. But in spite of that, when I got to Uranium City, there was a beautiful patrol boat on that inland ocean, Lake Athabasca. And I was the one that became the boatman. You wanted to go somewhere on that big lake, I was your man. And I found a place to sort of handle the fear of water. I mean, that thing is over 1,000 feet deep in the middle. It's rock on the south shore. There's rock cliffs as well as those beautiful Athabasca sand dunes. But I was on the water, and I had control of a fairly large boat, so I was able to come to grips with that almost primal fear. And that really helped me, and that started off a love for actually handling water, being handled by it. And that's why I never became a really highly skilled kayaker, because it became more important for me to build them and watch people get satisfaction in them than actually building them and paddling them myself. I became boat struck, which is a phenomena that the ancient boat builders, the wooden boat builders of Europe and North America on the coastlines, they were all boat struck. I mean, nothing they could do but handle wood and build watercraft. I settled on self-propelled watercraft because of the wellness factor, and early realizing that this thing was therapeutic for me. That happened years ago and just fueled kind of the fire, which I call kind of a primal fire, like to find out the ancient boats and learn how to build them. That was a major, major gift to my life. The Badarkas. Wow. and the Umiak, the big community boat that they use for whaling. And I was able to build one of those with Corey Friedman, a gifted builder on the West Coast in Washington State. And he was even contracted, by the way, by the Aleutian Island elders to regenerate the lost skill of that kind of boat building, because the elders had lost it. The boat builders were gone. And that's why the film, The Last Badarka, just aroused every cell of my body. And so I've dealt with the fear of water, terrible fear of water. And slowly, it's not only the water, Nicholas, but Pachamama, First Nations invitations into sacred circles that many white people have never been invited to, because they were seeing something that I wasn't seeing yet. I was slowly becoming one of them, I was slowly becoming an elder. In fact, my favorite, all-time favorite Indigenous friend, a grandfather, told me one day, he said, Gion, you are my elder. And I knew something profound had happened that incorporated not only my adventures into wellness, into nutrition, into fitness, into every area of my life was centered on getting the answers and living the answers to the questions of how does one become an elder.
Wow.
Well, yeah, it's profound for me.
Yeah, that's that's a lifetime that just got shared. And it's amazing. I mean, Gion, you flow with gratitude. You really do, all the time. And I want to contrast it with something that TRAK boldly, eddied out of, right? So you're having this conversation with us on this day, and it's November 27th. And it's called Black Friday out there, right? So it's marked by an intense consumerism and profit seeking, hence being in the black, right? So
Yes.
it's an extraordinary contrast. We talk about Blue Friday, we talk about eddying out, we talk about this sacred conversation we're having right now. So I'm clear that you have woven gratitude into your life. But for those elders that you talked about, Gion, before we really get into this journey, are there any elders, any teachers, mentors, and wisdom keepers that you want to speak their name and acknowledge and honor them before we move further down the river?
Well, I hesitate there, and here's the reason I hesitate, and you and Nolan know well the basis of that hesitation, and that is the idea of expropriation of a beautiful wisdom that has existed in my mind forever. And just the beauty in and around that wisdom when one allows oneself to dive deep into it. My hesitation comes from the idea of expropriation of something beautiful and valuable in another culture, and I take it on, and I'm looking good as a result of that. Now, I know that isn't the case with me. I know it isn't. In the deepest cell of my body, I know it isn't. But I'm still concerned that there are a lot of so-called medicine people, so-called shaman people, who have taken on the title, and so I'm naturally concerned about that. It does make me angry. It doesn't. It only upsets me to the point that I think they're the unauthentic ones, you might say. Like if anybody tells me, well, how do I step into this? Go and find an elder. Like go to where the wisdom is. Do that for yourself. It'd be the best gift you ever gave yourself. Find an elder. Learn the protocol. Take the gifts. Take the bright colored cloth and the tobacco. And if it's appropriate in that setting, maybe a little financial gift. And it shows respect. I've done that for decades, not knowing the profoundness of all that. So when I see Black Friday and I see what's happening in various states, I see the inhumanity to man in dictatorships and the putting down of indigenous people as less than, as savages, as illiterate. Like we even had Canadian politicians saying back in the days of the formulation of residential schools, we have to take the Indian out of the Indian. And they made it law. And look at the results. But below the radar screen of consensual reality is the beauty of the comeback. They're coming back in force across our nation and around the world. Central America, South America. These people knew they had something of incredible value to pass on to the world. And I simply I was being gifted left, right, and center. All I had to do was get in the kayak and follow the stream, really, to use your analogy. I mean, the gifts were profound. I couldn't help but notice them, and I couldn't help embrace them, you know? My two daughters occasionally say, Dad, really, what are you going to be when you grow up? and I said, quite frankly, I don't know yet. Because being guided into the beauty, the energy, like when I'm onto good medicine, my body tells me, I get goosebumps that, wow, I feel the energy of it. And that's a rare gift. And I think it comes almost totally from Indigenous people, from Indigenous elders. So the matriarch below the radar, the First Nations, they're a matriarchal system. There's a postmenopausal senior female elder. And she is the one that told her son, my very, very good friend and elder Joe Monroe, she said, invite Gion into the sacred teepee at the powwow at Muscadet. Joe had never heard of a white man being invited in there. And so why was I invited in? My original question, oh, those are elders, how did they become one? Unbeknownst to me, really, I was being invited into sacred, deeply sacred places because what they saw, well, what did they see? They saw a man who was genuinely, to the core of his being, respectful and listening. I mean, if you're before an elder, put some duct tape over your mouth and grow elephant ears, as I say, because if you follow the protocol, they will open because they want to teach. Most of them want to teach the white people about their wisdom. And I just went with the flow. A phenomenal gift. If I'm gifted with nothing else in my 82 years, I am satisfied and happy and deeply grateful for years and years of that. And I came from kind of the oppressor, the representatives of colonial regimes. I was a cop. Some of my predecessors went into the northern places, isolated places, and extracted children from their families. And if I ever came up against that, I made a vow when I was younger, if I was ever ordered to do that, I would have to leave. I'd have to resign. I'd go and do something else. It's been that profound, Nicholas, that profound.
With that.
Okay.
Sorry, Gion. Yeah.
Well, one more comment about eldership. I learned that when people in the tribe started coming to that person, be it a man or a woman, it was an indicator that they had growing into being a wisdom keeper. And it was reflected in the trust people had, and they would go to them for advice with a problem, with a life difficulty. And I walked with them long enough to realize that. Anyway, over to you.
Well, over to me, but in any regular circumstances around you, I probably would put duct tape on my mouth, but I can't do that this time, Gion. I am going to acknowledge your humility, and I'm going to be keep talking. And I'm excited for you to be our guide now on a journey we're going to take. We're going to follow an ancient river, okay? We're going to follow the circle and cycle of 10,000 years back in time.
Yeah.
Given what you just said, you're the perfect guide, right? So let's take that journey upstream to the source. Let's go back to find the world as it was then, 10,000 years ago. The waters of the first people of the North, and perhaps the origins of the first of their watercraft.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask some big questions, Gion, but I don't have any expectations, and certainly a lot of humility. But just share what you know. So if we go back to the first peoples, if we're sourcing this, right? We go back to the North, the Arctic, 10,000 years ago. Who were the people that lived on the land and the sea?
Oh, wow. Well, I believe that they were holders of a deep, very ancient, very primal, which I've been given gifts to tap into. And they're all gifts, they're not for me. A primal wisdom that was so interconnected, whether they would be water-based people in the Canadian Arctic, whether they be Greenlanders, whether they be the Aleutian Islanders, you know, and of course, long before recorded history, which is a white man's thing, really. Because the other wisdom, the real wisdom, is oral. And of course, then you have to have human beings as keepers of that, keepers of the stories, keepers of the legends, and they're beautiful. And even a modern Cherokee psychiatrist by the name of Louis Mel Madrona wrote some beautiful books while he was on faculty at the University of Arizona. He wrote Coyote Medicine. He wrote the narrative medicine, the power of the story. Well, in answer to your question, I think those early dwellers, as far back as my imagination can take me, embodied a centuries old body of wisdom developed from being super conscious, super mindful. Some of the buzzwords that are going around, you know, self-improvement nowadays in basically the white communities. See, very few First Nations people go for that because they've already got the key to wisdom. And genocide was attempted with them. It didn't work. Everything was tried to keep them down, keep them in the backwater, keep them inferior, and it didn't work. So why do we keep doing it? Some of my personal questions. But I believe those people, and when when I heard about TRAK, I was in Saskatoon, and I had to leave my second career because the PTSD had caught up with me. I could no longer work. In fact, I slid into chronic depression, lost 25 pounds. I was a basket case. I couldn't even think straight. And I know what brought me out of that, what helped me out of that is exactly what I'm talking about. That wisdom that was developed in ancient times, I mean, that's almost an understatement because we don't know how far back it goes. But when you combine the wisdom, the ocean wisdom of the Greenlanders and how they developed a shape that handled the biggest water in the most dangerous times and brought back food for family and community and honed just beautiful skills. Like when I started digging into that, I realized what it means deeply to be one with a kayak. You are one. It's indivisible. It's impossible to pull it apart. If you're in the zone, if you're in that mystical place of sort of understanding. And when I go to the Western Alaska, the Badarkas and the Umiaks, and I've got a beautiful Umiak, 21 feet long. It'll hold 10 paddlers. I've outfitted it with a couple of rowing stations that I love rowing as well as paddling. And I make my own Greenland and Aleutian paddles. And I get to work with my hands, which feeds my soul. There's no question about it. In fact, in building my first Badarka, I was tapping that ancient wisdom for which I'm trying to answer the question you asked. And to build either a Greenland kayak, which is slightly more rocker than a Badarka. Badarka is pretty well straight waterline. That's what makes it such a beautiful tracking boat. Fast. Beautiful. It's a multi-chine boat, so it's a different built for different reasons in ancient times because it exactly fitted for what it was meant to do in the water that it was meant to do it in. And both ends of the continent, as you know, huge water, some of the most violent water And yet these people went out in it and paddled and brought back food. So when I was building the Bidarka, you build it at height. You don't build it on a bench. And once you get the rocker set and you have all the ribs in place and you start tying them on a typical Bidarka, there's in excess of 300 fine little ties that tie everything together. They used ligamental tissue from caribou. They had caribou migrations, and they would go out, and of course it was like a buffalo jump for the Plains Indians. It would provide a huge amount in a short space of time to feed them for a long time because they knew how to preserve. They not only knew the conservation of how much to take. Anyway, Corey told me the story of when ancient builders of those boats built them, every tie, every one of those tiny little ties, 300 on a 16-foot Bidarka, and probably more because there's more than ribs and the longer ones to tie together. We used a waxed hemp cord, another demonized product by the establishment, hemp. Anyway, at each tie, there was a little prayer said, and I found myself. Now, just picture, I'm hypersensitive. I'm hyper regarding. That's one of the symptoms of PTSD. I'm hyper at who's around me, where my back is, in proximity to a wall or someplace really, really safe, like in a restaurant. Sit at the back, with your back at the wall. So I'm tying this off, and I lost track of time. That's one of the signals to me that I'm in the right place at the right time, and this is good medicine. But I, being hypersensitive, I realized, hey, I'm not alone in that great big shop. And I turned around, there's Corey standing in the background. And he smiled, and he said something to the effect, oh, you're in the zone. Well, I was embedded in that ancient legacy. That was a primal experience, a primal event for me, because my body was just totally in it. And I'm physically, I don't learn well sitting listening to other people. I can't learn that way. That's why I was a high school dropout when I was a kid. I mean, I couldn't sit in a row, open a textbook and read something and hear something from the front, and then simply, in order to get to the next grade, I just had to memorize it and pass the test. Early on, I thought, what's this all about? How can I learn in this environment? My oldest daughter is the same. And fortunately, we discovered Rudolf Steiner, and my grandchildren in Washington State have been long in a Waldorf school. Beautiful. So back to the kayak. So there were incidences along the way that just caused me to dive deeper, even into the element where I had long time childhood fear, and that was water. I became quite a good swimmer in RCMP training and in beyond, but it's still there. I still have that. If I get in a boat and I go in the water, that's one of the reasons, the gift of being super safe. So while it was a nightmare to begin with, it turned into a blessing. And that's the same with alcohol addiction. I can now say at 38, 39, when Adrian did a wonderful family intervention that saw me go into treatment. That was a major turning point. Like it was a major turning point and event in building these boats, because I was becoming more and more kind of thoughtful of the beauty and the wisdom of ancient ways. Fortunately, I'm hooked to a lovely farm belonging to a old friends couple, moved from Saskatoon to the valley east of Vernon, east of Lumbee, in the foothills, and it's big organic garden. So there's many returns to the ancient ways. The ancient in just a century or two, but I believe ancient in thousands
Yeah.
of generations.
Thank you for
So,
creating that, for recreating that, the feeling of thousands of years in those lineages that you felt channeled through the work that you did in making a boat.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
you know, earlier as we were creating this conversation, Hans Troop, the director, the TRAK director of development, had said, you made a comment earlier that building and getting that boat on the water thousands of years ago was a matter of survival. So it's true, right? So necessity being the mother of invention, of course demanded that being relentless and resilient, but there was another dimension you've just painted, another whole connection to nature, to the sea, and to the animals they hunted. So thank you for expanding on something I want to now move into, right? You were talking about the spiritual and sacred, you know, integrated with living and thriving in the elements. And you
yeah.
felt that as you were working on that boat, okay? So let's take the river now and narrow it a bit. Let's narrow the circle of the river to the last 100-year cycle, okay? The last century of time. It's marked the biggest changes in history, okay? So I want to, you know, narrow the circle now, Gion. I'd like to, you know, move into the river now that is the last 100-year cycle, right?
Mhm.
The last
Mhm.
century of time. It's marked the biggest changes in history. So, you know, as someone who's holding those thousands of years and has painted that picture for us, in your opinion, what have been the biggest changes in the last 100 years overall?
Wow. Boy, you sure come up with some great questions. Well, once again, it becomes personal. It becomes, well, I would suggest being a fairly keen observer of what's happening in the world. One of my favorite subjects when I did go to high school was history and geography. So it's stuff that I can imagine. I can, like, if you tell me that you were somewhere in Africa, immediately on my mental screen comes up the continent of Africa, the rivers, the mountains, the states, and it's. I mean, that's so. In the last 100 years, I'm thinking, well, maybe my shift from the first narrative I was living and I wrote up until that major turning point where Adrian did the intervention. You see, with PTSD, I'd become a chronic alcoholic. But at the same time, and Eddie knows how really crazy I was an accomplished marathon runner. I was living two lives. And fortunately, Adrian had the courage and the wisdom to say, look, I don't want our daughters to grow up anymore in this environment. So she, in a way, did some constructive coercion, I like to call it. And she left on the train with our daughters, 11 and 8 years old, and went back to Saskatchewan. And typically, with a really troubled alcoholic, my first choice was I stayed drunk for a week. Really? I mean, it shows how insanity had really taken over. But I was at the peak of my game at the Canadian Police College. I was one of a handful that were selected for faculty. I mean, goodness. And and I signed myself in, jumped on a bus up to North Bay, Ontario, and probably as I thought I was unlucky at the time, but it ended up being an absolute blessing. A very strong, assertive, at times aggressive, assertive order of Roman Catholic nursing nuns, the Order of St. Joseph. And I was basically locked in for 30 days. But it was the beginning of a whole new narrative. I drew from stuff in the past, the elders, the First Nations, the water work on Lake Athabasca. That all was now allowed to come forward and be built on. And from there, I quit the RCMP at a time when it was extremely unpopular. In fact, it was written in my personal file. I was one of the most disloyal ex-members of the RCMP ever. Freedom of information, I was able to read that. Anyway, so that all happened. But for me and water and boats, Gion and I, we ran out of money, and after 2 years of university, so we packed up Jody. She was just a newborn, got a little U-Haul trailer and the old car we had, and we headed north. And I played hockey for a wonderful mine manager, mine captain, who was now working the copper mine just north of Orange in Saskatchewan. And we settled in. They taught me how to run the big diesel electric power plant, and it worked extremely well. But there I began thinking, the mine had built a hand-built rough water boat with a small motor on it, and we were the only ones that used it. And it was parked just down the road at the north, a little bay, an inlet of Lac L'Orange, a big, huge, beautiful northern lake. And we went out many times, the three of us, and fished, and it was a wonderful, wonderful time. But during that time, I got an outdoor magazine. See, there was no internet. The snail mail was all you had. And I found in the United Kingdom a marine architect that had devised and built a plywood 14-foot kayak. Got to have it. So I wrote it. I still have the plans, full paper plans. That was 1968. Now, why didn't I build the boat? It wasn't timely. I accept that now. There's no shame involved in being lazy and not building it. I still have the plan. So it's still a possibility. And when I heard about TRAK after spending years at the university, I did a wonderful job there as well, and brought in a restorative justice for student offenses, unheard of. And it worked beautifully. The principles of circle work. And I was invited to attend a lot of sentencing circles on reserves in Saskatchewan. And I learned that ancient practice. And going back to your question, the first people, say 10, 15,000 years ago, how did they deal with conflict? How did they deal with it? I think all of them looked at that person who had simply done something wrong. They were out of harmony with the tribe, the survivability of the tribe. Now you can imagine if that had been a kayak hunter, the effect would have been phenomenal. And that's the way they dealt with it. They invited the wrongdoers or whatever they did back into harmony with the tribe. I never did agree with our criminal justice system. It's not justice, it's retribution, you know? So I heard about TRAK from a friend who called me and apologized in Saskatoon saying, oh, I apologize. I met with two guys last night and there was quite a few people there and they were demonstrating this folding kayak. It's called TRAK. And after chastising him severely, I got the number and I phoned and I got Nolan. That's what, 14, 15 years ago. And on the phone, I knew I had struck it rich. Now that's interesting because the next day, and Adrian knew that I was in trouble. I was in trouble emotionally. Like I had gotten off the good red road. I was wandering in the ditch. I needed to get back. And she encouraged me. She says, go. So the next day I drove to Calgary, walked in the office. It was closing time. But another beautiful moment. Gord Espaceth had built a prototype. And there was only one big piece of machinery in the shop, and we had to get a whole bunch, as you know, all the machinery and learn to do it and all that sort of thing. And that's where Francisco comes in absolutely essentially, beautifully. Some of my best working life was supporting him, and we had so much fun because he's got a marvelous sense of humor besides being an absolute genius. He got us into production in 6 months. And I personally never thought, we'll never learn how to build these things. We don't know how to build them. Anyway, when I saw the kayak on the table, my immediate words were, because by that time I knew it. I didn't own one, I hadn't built one, but where did the knowledge come from? I saw the shear line of that boat. It was slightly rockered, and I was just mesmerized. And I was in. In fact, when I offered, I said, is it possible to get a job here? and the vice president, Gord Heisler, who interviewed me, he said, all I can offer you is $14 an hour. Like, what's that all about? And I just simply said, and he didn't understand at the time, I don't think, but I said, it's not about the money. It has nothing to do with the money. It has to do with the draw of the experience. Like I saw primal stuff in that boat. I saw it. I felt it. And so and then Nolan said, oh, I've only got 15 minutes here and then I got to go. 2 hours later, we're still almost nose to nose, connecting really spiritually. It was a spiritual connection, but the boat was primal. I think all that wisdom, getting back to the question you asked, I think that was inherent, that people, indigenous people around the world, we know that now, developed that by being so interconnected with Pachamama, with the animals and birds, wildlife, every sentient being, and even non-sentient beings, the trees and the rock people, and which of course to early colonists was paganism, savagery. But we miss something huge by not recognizing a little bit of the wisdom. And the greatest gift to me is the knowledge that it's coming back, and I can support that. I can support it, just like you and Nolan and others are. Thank you.
Through this 100 years, Gion, you've masterfully woven that the sacred, the traditions, the lineage has somehow survived these biggest changes in our environment, the atmosphere, the water, the land, the development, the information age and technology. And now, we're into this, like, we're going to narrow the circle that the river is flowing in, right? We're going to come into the last 10 years. You've just now brought us into the time you first met Nolan and TRAK, right? And now we're talking and we're sourcing the wellness in all these stories. You talked about being boat struck, the importance of the tying knots and making and putting your hand in it and carrying that tradition forward. So, I want to bring Nolan into the conversation now, because that was the moment you met him, right? And you're saying you saw the TRAK and it's now primal. It's holding the energy of that. And so if we look at the last 10 years, and we look at 10 years out, Nolan is making a new kind of craft. It's called a corporate vehicle, right? It's a corporate craft, right? And you've been part of that, right? So the circle now opens up and loops into the future, the next 10-year cycle, right? To explore the future and get a glimpse out of that. So Nolan, this 10,000 years to now, with Gion with us now, what's TRAK up to as a corporate vehicle? What is it about it being a craft, and what's it designed to carry forward?
Thanks, Nicholas. That's quite a question.
Got some humdingers, eh?
Yeah, for sure.
Is the heat getting warm?
I think what's really been coming to me and through our team, and I just feel very fortunate that we have this opportunity now. I think just at the kind of the confluence of all the things going on in the world and all that, to really kind of, like I said, clear the clutter, get to the core, get to the source of things. We have to do that, each of us individually. And I think accessing that ancient wisdom, and it connects into the kayak, and that primal vehicle connected to, you're in the kayak, in the water, we're made of water. It's the ultimate truth. We have all this noise that we're distracted by nowadays. And so I feel, what's really been coming to me lately has been, and it's through our team and through all the people around the world and through all of our customers that have had these experiences. It just kind of, I've been drawn into it intuitively, and I've just kept kind of going. Gion's laughed at me several times. He's like, how does this keep, how have you kept this up over the course of time and with what you've had to deal with? And for me, I can say that I don't know. Like, I don't have, if you look at it just consciously or you know, just in a linear way, it doesn't make sense. Like if you just look at it, you know, common sense, most people would look at it and go, well, that doesn't, you know, it doesn't add up. For me, I've been drawn into it. And so we have this kayak, and the kayak is just representative of something, but it does kind of help us clear the clutter and get to the source of truth for ourselves and what that experience is like for each of us every time we get out on the water. And that is symbolic of the rest of our life. And so I think this isn't the time to follow trends. Like I think companies that, and what I'm kind of drawn in to do and how to move things forward is to really carve out our own path here with our community. You know, we have incredible pilots from around the world, a great team behind it, the customers that have come up. Like we're kind of an oddball little company, that we're this small little company in Canada that has customers, you know, on all over the planet, and they're drawn in for some reason. And I think that a lot of our customers, whether they know it or not, a lot of the people that are on this call or coming into TRAK in their own way, there's a direct knowing. There's a more sort of conscious knowing that people have, but there's a subconscious knowing. There's people step into things and they don't necessarily know why, you know, and that's been my own experience. And I would suggest there's probably a lot of other people like that, that get drawn in for whatever reason, and that there's something there. And I believe just at a higher level that it's this tapping into this 10,000 year history, you know. And some of the most inspirational things I've been, you know, obviously the training on indigenous wisdom from around the world, and the fact that a lot of these indigenous communities, as you know, Nicholas, and you as well, Gion, and several others on the call probably understand this too, is that no matter where you go on the planet, before there was information technology or there was any communication, a lot of these ancient principles and ways of living and ways of engaging nature and life are the same everywhere around the planet. It's a mystery. It's extremely intriguing, you know, to recognize that that's coming from somewhere, you know.
Oh, yes.
And I can tell you that some of the most inspirational things, or the best wisdom that I've tapped into recently, has been from the eras of, you know, Rudolf Steiner and guys from 100 years ago to maybe 140 years ago, you know. And what we've been distracted with the last 100 years is there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of agendas, and there probably was always to some extent, but we're really seeing we're seeing the tip of that, you know, we're seeing the sharp edge of that right now. And so doesn't matter what company you're dealing with or what company you're building or project that you have, I think tapping into that sort of original wisdom is extremely important, and really kind of carving it out yourselves, not following trends, but like what is there, what is, and we're getting into this right now, this relentless originality. Cheryl, who is on this call, I don't know if she still is, last month shared a beautiful piece from Courtney's work around relentless originality, and that picture, that photograph of the child standing on the rock, fishing in the rain. And some of that was a quote from John O'Donoghue, I believe, the theologian and philosopher from Ireland. And his line, or his concept he was talking about, was this relentless originality, you know. And so we're looking at the origins of humanity we're talking about on here, which the craft of the kayak, you know, going back, you know, somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 years of the kayak. But this relentless originality for each of us individually is like this inner child. You know, we talk about the power of the inner child, like we tap into our inner child. And I think that's what people are looking for. And that's what we're excited to be in service of. We provide this kind of kayak that people can tap into some of that vitality that they felt when they were a kid, you know. And Gion, you share that beautifully in terms of your own experience. Courtney, one of our close friends who Cheryl was on this call as well. Courtney was was he not a child? He was the child within. I love that man. Every time I was around him, you just had this energy because he was tapped into that inner child. And I think we've lost that to some extent. And so being able to be of service to the things that people, experiences people can have that give them that access to that inner child. I mean, that's what it's all about for me. If their profits end up happening over time with TRAK, that's a gravy. For me, the importance is like, what kinds of experiences are people getting, and can we expand that? And I think that's any company that's got a big vision, or any project or anything that you're tapped into, you want to be at the source of that vitality, and what is it that really makes it juicy for you. And I think that if I had a way to kind of put words to my own experience and why I've kept this thing rolling all these years, it's that I get the goosebumps. And Gion, you and I share that experience of goosebumps when we talk about these experiences we have. And so I think that when we looked at each other eyeball to eyeball that day, when I only had 15 minutes, and 2 hours later we ended up leaving with grins from grins right up to our ears. That just started something. That was a spark, and where it's led has been beautiful. And like I said, to start this call off, I wouldn't be where I am right now in the same way, having not met you. And how do you explain that? How did that happen? It's beautiful. So that's all I would say.
Wow.
Nicholas, may I say something?
Absolutely. It's
Yeah,
it's yours.
about a week or 2 weeks after I joined TRAK, the timing is not the important thing. The event is profound. Nolan and I met at a little Mexican cantina on near the bird sanctuary along the Bow River, which was my go-to place to sit. And my oldest daughter Jody in Calgary, single mom with 16-year-old girls. Those girls grew up really wandering the pathways in that sanctuary. So it's a very sacred place. But initially, I'd never been there before. And Nolan and I are walking along. We had some wonderful Mexican food, and it was a sunny day in the fall. And we were walking along, and we really didn't know where we were going. Like just, and it was if we rethought that, it was probably following the course of the water. But I just realized that now. Anyway, we wandered around a lot of the paths, and time had gone, and it was wonderful because we were getting to know, as that same O'Donoghue, that philosopher, Irish priest. That's where I first heard of Anam Cara, soul friend. And of course, you have become that, and Nolan has become it, and others, Curtis and Jason. There's been many other people who, Bruce and many others, Cheryl for sure, and Courtney. In fact, my backdrop is a beautiful enlarged pool shot, and I think you have one too, Nicholas, isn't it? And Nolan has one at the back of his. And so I want to. Cheryl is just she was a find and a real keeper as a friend. Anyway, we're just walking along, and suddenly there's a sign in front of us. So we walk up to it, and it says the end of the trail. Well, immediately both of us thought, who has the audacity to put up something like that? Like, in other words, you can't go any further. It's undeveloped. It's not appropriate. It's unsafe because it's just natural woodland. And we've done a job on kids in the woods. Richard Love wrote that beautiful book, The Last Child in the Woods. Anyway, we made that a conversation piece, a very important one over the years, because neither one of us, we saw all kinds of trail potentials. You could just wander off and walk anywhere you wanted. You had to bushwhack a bit, but hey, what's with this, the end of the trail? We never did buy into that. And so that really helped our growing the concept of anam cara. And one other point about Blue Mind and the water, a number of years ago, well, not long, maybe 3 years ago, I don't know. I don't wear a watch anymore, so linear time just doesn't equate anymore, it seems. Everything's in a circle. And she phoned me and she said, you know what, Dad? You have a blue mind. And I didn't know whether it was a criticism or a compliment. And so she told me about it. She told me about Wallace Nichols' book. I went and got it. And typically, if a book or somebody's writing really resonates, I like to say I devoured that book. More than just the written words, I identify with the spirit and the energy. And I may never meet Wallace. I saw him on one of the that you did with the TRAK interviews, but it resonated deeply. I said, yeah, now I can go back. I love reflecting and pondering. I can go back in my history and see where water spoke and I just wasn't knowledgeable in it. I wasn't informed enough yet to get the essence of it, get the meaning of it. And that's happening more and more. One other point. We talk about holding space for people, for a project, for whatever the case might be. And I've kind of taken that on as an internal study for many, many years, but now it's been connected and integrated beautifully with First Nations people being a keeper of something sacred. Like my buddy Joe Monroe, the elder, he's a acknowledged what they call eagle bone whistle carrier, which at a time in a powwow, if the spirit is speaking and somebody is listening, Joe will blow the whistle and it stops everything because there's an issue that needs to be healed. And it's just a beautiful event. So we can become keepers of sacred space to hold it for something, some healing, some the success of a project. It could be for anything that we hear about. So I have acknowledged myself humbly as being I've learned the process by going to where the knowledge was. Go to the wisdom, which is unconventional. It's not consensual reality. Well, you've studied the shamanic, and it's a fiercely individual stance outside of consensual reality, outside of the boxes that we build for people to get comfortable in and to become like prisons. And so the end of the trail, there's no such thing. I think Nolan's with me on that one. And I've got a blue mind.
That's why I like. That's why I love kayaking. You're out on the water trail. There's not many ends of the trail.
Exactly. And Gion, there may not be an end to the trail, and I think we've now the river has flowed into the ocean, but there definitely has to be an end to the Zoom call. Okay.
That's right. Yeah. Well,
I'm so sorry about that, but I do want to say one thing. You did give us a gift. You gave us a gift that most people don't know on this call because you shared it earlier with Nolan and I want to recreate it as we close off here. You gave us the gift of a poem, Ithaca.
Ithaca.
Yeah, a number of times in our preparation for this conversation by the Greek poet Constantine Cavafy. And there's one piece of it I want to share and then like you to share some final words, but it was written in 1911. So this fits in that 100-year circle. And the part that you said to remember is that hope that your journey is a long one. full of adventure, full of discovery. So for the last words, closing, the last drop, down to the last drop, what would you like to leave us with, Gion? What would you like to say to close off this conversation and you know, acknowledge where we got to?
Okay. Yes. Yes, something comes immediately to mind. For all the people who are listening, some I've met, some I haven't, some I hope to. And for some dear old friends that are on the call, my journey to Ithaca, that mystical place, which the whole idea of mysticism and that kind of magic that comes with it really resonates for me. So I would suggest that you not only listen to the poem, Sean Connery, the voice, reads the poem Ithaca, and it's only a few minutes long. But I would invite you. It's like being invited onto the Good Red Road. There's that road is built on wisdom of the ages. So I trust it, and I pass on to you the suggestion to entertain or consider the part of trusting it. And if there's things in your own personal journey that you can embrace, maybe from the bucket list, maybe from dreams unfulfilled. I dream a lot, and that's where I experience where the wisdom is. So think about Ithaca. I'm 82 years old, and I don't know how many years I got left for the long journey, as the poet said. But I'm delightfully happy and fulfilled and grateful. Grateful is on my lips many, many times every day of my life. But I can picture myself on that Ithaca journey. Hermann Hesse wrote Siddhartha, and it's basically the same kind of genre story of one that leaves and goes out and wanders in search of his or her own personal truth. I find in my kind of religious interests, the Baha'i faith is the only one that recommends search for your own truth. Don't believe what I believe or what somebody maybe in authority believes. Search it for yourself. I think you'll find it on the Good Red Road because it's a powerful place. It's a place of energy, the same as the journey to Ithaca. Thank you, Nicholas.
Gion, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Nolan, I'd like you to have a last word to acknowledge Gion's contribution to the community, to our call. And if you'd like to share a little bit about the future and what's coming, right? Feel free to do that. But I'm deeply touched, Gion, by your contribution today. So Nolan, I'll let you close us out, you know, and we can sail on into the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
Well, full circle. For me, you know, going back to the origin, you know, my story with TRAK has a lot to do with you and your, you know, our journey early on with TRAK. I like I said, I don't think we'd be in this position without you. You've had that kind of impact on me and on the community. And you talk about the comeback. Earlier on, you shared the comeback.
Yes.
I want to invite everyone to consider that as a humanity, you know, that comeback is available to all of us. So no one owns that original wisdom. You know, there's no indigenous community that owns it. We're human. This is ours. Not ours, but it's available to embrace. And that comes from a deep connection with nature. And so the invitation is we all can take on this comeback of original wisdom. Find your own truths. Take on that original wisdom. Find the elders, as you say, Gion. Find your source of that kind of energy and vitality and that truth for yourself. You know, we're all part of that. We all have it. We all have it available to us. And so that comeback is there for everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Mitakueo Yasin. Look up that Lakota Sioux prayer. It's powerful. Go in a good medicine way, my friend.